Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. This is PM101 Project Management 101, our highly successful free training program for everyone who's new to project management, who wants to get into the field of project management. This is your gateway to the world of project management. Now, we are all about PMP, we are all about project management, so definitely subscribe if you like such content. And also, this is our updated version. This PM101 training video that you're watching is our updated version since the PMBOK guide edition 7 is out. So a lot of things remain the same, like the definition of a project or the definition of project management does not change with the coming of PMBOK 7, but whatever that has changed is what you will find updated as part of this training video. So stick around, check this session out in its entirety, and let's get into the world of project management. So what can you expect out of this long lasting session, right? So what can you expect? Why should you watch this session? The first thing, like I said earlier, this is going to be your gateway into the world of project management. So we will talk about a lot of basics of project management. This is going to be an introduction session. Again, if you are already aware of the basics of project management, and once you go through the initial slides, the initial part of the session, you will already know the basics of project management. Then we are going to take a step ahead. We are going to take a step deeper into the world of project management, and we'll know some more stuff about project management, which will be much better than just the basics. So if you are into project management, if you're starting off your career in project management, or if you're thinking about getting into the career, into the domain of project management, then this session is definitely going to be helpful for you. Another point is this is also going to introduce you to the PMP courseware. Now, PMP, if you're not aware, is the gold standard certification in the field of project management. It is offered by Project Management Institute USA. PMP stands for Project Management Professional. This channel is all about PMP. This channel is all about project management. So I'd like to repeat, subscribe if you haven't done so already. All right, let's move on. So a brief about me, although I cover this slide only when I'm on stage in much more detail and give it some time. But in this video, I'd like to just share that I got my PMP in 2016. And I'd like to remind you to check out the website pmclounge.com, which is your #1 free PMP resource, and subscribe to the channel youtube.com/pmclounge if you haven't done so already. All right, so let's take a look at the agenda for the session. This agenda has been meticulously designed to ensure that we start off with the basics of project and the basics of project management. And as we move further, we try to enrich your understanding of projects and project management, and we take basically a deeper view of project management, a step ahead in our understanding of project management. Towards the end, we also have project management domains. This is specific to PMBOK Guide Edition 7. It talks about people, process, business environment. So if you want to get yourselves the PMP certification, this area is also going to be very helpful. There are some changes from our original program in this agenda as well. So from our original training session, you will find some updates in some of these topics like organizational structure, something that I can think of on top of my mind. So there are some changes as well. So stick around, enjoy the entire session, and let's get started. What is a project? Now, first thing to note is that a project is temporary. It is something which is temporary. It has a definite start and end date. So there is going to be a start date and an end date. And that is why a project is something which is temporary, thereby having a defined scope and resources. So there's only so much you can do between definite start and end date, right? So that is the reason why you should have a defined scope and you should have defined resources that can be consumed within this definite start and end date. So that is what project is. 101, very basic. That is what project is. Now, a project is also unique. That means there is nothing like this which has been done earlier. That is the definition of unique right there. A project is also supposed to be unique. It is not routine everyday operational work. Now, this is what we mean when we say a project is unique. Nothing like that has been done before. A project is unique in the sense that it is not your everyday operational work, which has a repetitive output. It is a specific set of activities designed to accomplish a well-defined, unique objective. So there you have the textbook definition of a project. It is a specific set of activities which are designed to accomplish a well-defined, unique objective. So there is a unique objective which is well-defined, and that is what we are setting out to achieve as part of a project. Now you may recognize these world famous projects, the pyramids, creating the pyramids. That was a project. The Wall of China, the Great Wall of China, right? Construction of the Great Wall of China was a project. Similarly, construction of the Taj Mahal was also a project. So these are some of the world famous projects. But then projects are not just construction work. These are also projects. Having a man reach the moon, right? That is a project. Designing a car, this is also a project. Or creating a software package, this is also a project. So, like I said, projects are not just construction work. Projects can be anything that have a unique output. Nothing like this was done before. A car like this was never designed before. A software like this was never made before. So all of these projects had a unique output. So let's do a little bit of practice here. Setting up a mobile phone factory. This is a project. Assembling thousands of mobile phones every day. What do you think? Is that a project? No, sir, that is not a project, and there's a specific name for this. It is an operation. Putting together a team of research analysts to come up with a design and a prototype of a waterproof phone within 6 months. Just read this again. Putting together a team of research analysts. So you have put together a team. These are resources to come up with a design and a prototype. So this is your well-defined output of a waterproof phone. Again, this is part of the output within 6 months. So this is the time frame that you have. What is this? Of course, this is a project. This basically satisfies all the conditions that we read about project earlier. Manufacturing thousands of those waterproof phones using the design blueprint. So this project is now complete. You have come up with the design, you have come up with the prototype of how to kind of come up with that project, right? How to make that project. Now, how to make that mobile phone? How can you manufacture that? You have the design, you have the prototype with you. Now, what you're doing basically is you are manufacturing thousands of those waterproof phones using the design blueprint, using the output of the previous project. So now, manufacturing thousands of these phones, is that a project? No, sir, that is not a project. It is an operation. So I hope this was clear. I hope you were able to understand what a project is and what is the difference between a project and an operation. Number two is, where do projects come from? So how do we come up with these projects? That's a good question, right? That's a good place to start. So if there is a change in technology or a new technology has come up, right, then projects may emerge from them. So GPS was when GPS came to the mobile phones, there were a lot of projects, a lot of apps that were developed to make use of the GPS. So new technology brought new projects. Competitive forces, if you're in the market and there are forces in your competition, of course, they will. You may have to come up with new projects to stay ahead of the competition. Material issues, right? You might be using certain materials for certain projects which are no longer used. Political changes, market demand, economic changes are all changes related to the outside of your office, the real world changes, right? Customer requests, if a customer wants something, well, you have to deliver. Stakeholder demands, legal requirements. Oh, so sometimes there could be legal issues with you know, your product or anything that you offer, and that may, you may have to come up with new projects to deal with those legal requirements. An example that comes to mind was the Samsung Note phone, which kind of was blasting with the customers, right? I'm not sure what phone was that. Was that Note or something? But yeah, so that phone started blasting and customers started reporting it. News media started covering it. So legally, you cannot sell a phone that is a potential bomb. So you have to come up with a new project. And that project was to how you are going to deal with the media, how you're going to deal with the customers, and how you're going to phase out those phones so that you kind of stop the manufacturing of those phones. But how do you deal with all of this? That is a potential project. A legal requirement has led to that project. Business process improvements, strategic opportunities, business needs, social needs, environmental considerations also lead to new projects. So these are some of the avenues, some of the pointers that uh, you know are basically initiating projects. These are some of the pointers that give birth to projects. Project constraints. Now, this is something very, very useful, and this is something which I'd like you to pay attention to. The classic triple constraint triangle. So, we have something which is known as triple constraint triangle, which is also known as iron triangle as well. So these are project constraints. You have time, you have scope, you have cost, and then you have quality as well. So these are project constraints, and these are put together as form of a triangle, because if you decrease the time, let's say you decrease the time of a project, what is going to happen with this triangle is the scope may remain the same, but the cost is going to rise. So this area, this line is going to be larger than the previous line, this line, and which means your cost has increased if you have decreased the time of the project. And what has happened to quality? Quality is the entire area. So quality is also decreasing. Why? Because quality is defined by the entire area of the triangle, of the triple constraint triangle. So the quality, if you see in the previous triangle, the quality was quite high, the area was quite large. Now the area is smaller, and that is why quality is decreasing. So this is the reason why we call time, cost, scope, and quality a part of the triple constraint triangle, because a change in any of these, a change in cost, a change in scope, project scope, a change in the project time or project schedule is going to impact the other constraints of project. So this is something which you as a project manager need to take care of, and that is why we introduced this topic, the project constraints. To note, like I just said, these constraints are interrelated. So a strain on one of the core constraints will affect one or more of the other constraints as well. This is also known as iron triangle of project management, like I mentioned earlier. So this is the triple constraint triangle, also known as iron triangle of project management. And this is something which is very, very important for you as a student of project management. This should be the first thing that you should be studying after you know what the project management is, what project is. Now, if you go deeper, like I said, we'll go a step deeper from the basics. You will realize that it is not a triangle anymore. There are some other constraints as well. We talked about time, we talked about cost, we talked about scope, we also talked about quality, but then what about risk? What about resources? If you are decreasing the time for a project, if you're decreasing the time required to achieve a project, it is possible that the cost is going to increase, right? The other constraints are going to have an impact. But what about resources? What about the materials that you need to achieve that project, right? If it is a construction project and it was supposed to finish in 6 months, now you say you need that in 5 months, it is possible that the cost is going to increase. It is possible that the quality may decrease, but it is also possible that the resources you need, the manpower that you need, is also going to increase, right? So that is the reason why these are some more project constraints that you need to take care of. What about risk? The risk is also going to increase. In the same example that I just talked about, isn't there a risk if you are finishing a construction project which is supposed to take 6 months, you are finishing that in 5 months? What are some of the risks? Our folks that work in the construction area are going to tell you, well, that there is going to be a risk because there is certain time that you need after a construction is done for, let's say, watering the area, for, let's say, I am not sure about the exact civil civil engineering definition or civil engineering word for it, but yes, the risk is going to increase if you're going to reduce the time. I'm 100% sure about that. So these are some more project constraints that you need to consider as a project manager. Now let's talk about how do you define project success. So we just discussed the project constraints, and now if you have delivered a project, if you're done with the project, if you're done with the construction that you were talking about, how do you know that the project that you delivered was a successful project or not? So we just talked about constraints, and those are some of the areas that define the success of a project as well. So number one is going to be schedule. You need to continually evaluate your progress as you go. As a project manager, you need to make sure that the schedule that you have, 6 months construction project, you need to make sure to continually check with the project team after 1 month. Where are you? What is our progress? Will we be able to finish the remaining tasks in the remaining 5 months? At the end of second month, you need to go ahead and check with the project team again. Where do we stand? Will we be able to complete the project in the next 4 months? So this is something that you as a project manager need to do, and you need to work out the slippages in a timely manner. So if there is any slippage, if you are supposed to have completed a certain part of the construction project by the end of 3 months, but you're not able to do so, how do you handle those slippages? That again is a part and a job of a project manager. An example here is from the Bangalore Metro Phase 1 project. This was supposed to complete in March 2010, but after missing at least 9 subsequent publicly announced deadlines, the Phase 1 metro was finally opened to public in October 2011. So there was uh, basically slippage in schedule from March 2010 to October 2011. So schedule is something which is very important, and it defines the success of your project. If you are delivering your project on schedule, then it is quite possible that you can say that yours was a successful project. But delivering the project on schedule, is that the only way you define a successful project? Of course not. There are four more. Let's look at all of them. Point B is going to be cost. And I'd agree with you. If you look at this point and say, well, this should actually rank first in the list. To help with the schedule, what about the cost, right? What about the dollars? What about the money? And of course, it could rank actually first in this list. How do you hold and control cost is you evaluate. Just like schedule, you need to evaluate the amount that your project has already spent. You need to do that in a timely manner. You can also look forward and reforecast to compare with the original budget. So let's say the schedule was 6 months for the construction project that we were talking about in the previous slide. And let's say the scope, for the sake of simplicity, let's say the uh, cost that you had forecast in the beginning of the project was 60,000 US dollars. So at the end of 3 months, you should ideally be at 30,000 US dollars, right? And of course, this is just for the sake of simplicity. So let's say at the end of 3 months, if you have already spent 40,000 US dollars and you're left with 3 months and 20,000 US dollars, then you need to do a reforecast and you need to compare that with the original budget, and you need to make sure that your project falls in place, or you need to make sure that extra funds are arranged. But at the first place, you need to ensure that you don't waste money, you don't spend more than you're supposed to. Cost overrun is going to be fatal for your project. Mark my words on that. So in 2006, let's take a look at an example. So in 2006, 33 kilometer of Bangalore Metro Phase 1 work had a baseline cost of 6,395 crores, which is 63.95 billion Indian rupees. Due to delays, an extension of metro work to 42.3 kilometer. Here's something important to note. The original scope of this project was 33 kilometer, right? Construction was to be done for 33 kilometer, but later the scope was changed. The scope changed to 42.3 kilometer, right? A change of almost a little less than 10 kilometers here. But just look at the cost that has changed. 6,395 crores to the final cost of 14,405 crores, right? So this project basically had is a major case of cost overrun. But this also had a change in scope. Uh, but if you see, the cost has actually changed, and it is now costing more than twice of the original budget, with a change of just less than 10 kilometers. Number three, without any guesses, is quality. And if you recall the iron triangle that we talked about, cost is here, schedule is here, and now quality is also here. So these three define whether your project was a success or not. Again, there are two more factors that define, which we will look into after this slide. So quality, how do you maintain quality for your project? Again, just like cost and just like schedule, quality is something which you need to review timely and at the end of each project phase as well. So what is a project phase? This is something we will be discussing later on in this session. So keep that in mind. Let's park that aside for now, but understand the fact that you need to review, as a project manager, you need to review quality timely. Now, how do you review quality? And that is where quality standards come into the picture, right? In your 6 months project for construction, right? You need to have quality standards with you. You need to understand what is the quality standard for a 2 month old project, right? Let's take another example for the sake of simplicity. Let's try to understand from the perspective of a web development project. Let's say you are creating a website. A well-defined quality standard would mean that the homepage should load in 0.05 seconds. First thing is, this is a very well-defined quality standard that the project manager and the project team is aware of, and they should be working towards achieving this quality standard. And the second thing is, it should be accessible. The quality standards which are defined, right? by the end customer, by the project sponsor, or whoever has designed or defined the quality standards. These standards should be easily accessible by the project team. It should not be locked away somewhere on another uh, country, in another country, where the project team cannot reach out for it, right? They should be easily accessible. Now, some example here is the food is not good here. That movie is boring. This phone is really bad. That car is a work of art. Bangalore metro is pretty crowded. If you see, the quality standards in these examples are not well defined. Not good. What do you mean by not good? What is the definition of good? Similarly, the movie is boring. How boring is it? What is the definition of boring? A movie being, a movie you call a movie boring, it may be boring for one person, but it could not be boring for the another person, right? So the quality standards are very subjective in these examples, and they should be well defined. These quality standards are not well defined. The phone is really bad. This is something very personal. You may say that Windows phones are really bad. I may tend to think the opposite. I may feel that Windows Phone are really good. So we need to define quality standards, and that is why quality is important. That is why quality should be reviewed timely and standards should be defined. This is an important factor to determine whether your project was successful or not. Another point is stakeholders satisfaction. Now, I have a separate section on stakeholders as well. This is one of the important topic for your PMP preparation as well. So I have taken a brief section in this session itself for stakeholders. So we'll talk about stakeholders in further details as well later on in this session. But this is also something which defines how successful your project was. So you may see a lot of surveys in your daily life, right? Facebook puts out a survey, or let's say your employer puts out a survey, or let's say a political party or a government puts out a survey. They are all there for a reason. They, just like our previous slides, when we did a timely check on schedule, we did a timely check on cost, we did a timely check on quality, survey is also a timely check with the stakeholders level of satisfaction. So even qualitative checks during the course of the project is worth it, instead of somehow working through the project and completing it with only the project manager being happy. So while you are working on the project, while you were working on that 6 months construction project, at the end of 2 months or at the end of 3 months, ask your project team, ask the person who's paying for that project, and take their feedback. Even if it is qualitative, right? You don't have to ask them to give you marks out of 10 on 10 different topics, right? You don't have to do that. Even qualitative checks, is everything good or is everything not good? Qualitative checks like these are also going to help you make sure that the stakeholders are satisfied with your project. An example here is the presence of a high pressure petroleum pipeline forced the Bangalore metro route to airport to be altered. The Bangalore-Mangalore petroleum pipeline has become an important stakeholder. So while the Bangalore metro route was being planned, nobody went and took a survey, or nobody went and took a qualitative check as well with the Bangalore-Mangalore petroleum pipeline. This organization, nobody checked with them whether they were okay with the route that the Bangalore Metro had finalized for the airport. What happened was they finalized the route and then they had to alter it because this stakeholder was never surveyed. This stakeholder was never asked if they were okay with the route, if they were okay with the plan, and they became a very important stakeholder because you cannot have a metro route in the vicinity of a high pressure petroleum pipeline, right? So this is why stakeholder satisfaction is important. This is why Doing a check with the stakeholders is important when you are in the course of delivering your project. Finally, the last point is alignment to business case. So there is a business case for every project. A project needs to make business sense. And what is the business sense that the project is going to make is written in the business case document. So how aligned was your project to that business case document, right? Cost, schedule, quality are just one part of the puzzle. Did your project meet the original benefits it set out for? And these benefits are defined in the business case document. So do the problems that led to the project being conceived still exist? Are you working on something nobody wants? So that 6 months construction project that we were talking about was actually being was actually a house being built for someone who was paying for it. But we came to know at the end of 4 months that the person paying for the project, that the person paying for that construction of the house is actually moving to a different country permanently. Does that mean he wants that house now? Maybe not. Maybe the problem that the project was going to solve has does not even exist anymore, right? So at that time, for you as a project manager, you need to do a check on this as well, whether your project is still aligned to the business case or not. What if people find shared cabs a better, more convenient, and cheaper alternative to metro? If you are the project manager working on the Bangalore metro and you find within the course of delivering your project itself that the people are finding shared cabs as a better and more convenient and even cheaper alternative to metro, are you going to go ahead and still deliver your project? Are you going to still go ahead and deliver the Bangalore metro that you had promised that you were working on? Maybe or maybe not, because the original business case, the original problem that metro was going to solve has already been solved. So these were the 5 factors that define, after you're done with your project, these 5 factors define whether your project was a success or not. Now that we have talked about constraints, now that we have talked about how and you can say that a project was successful, let's talk about project management. And I have specifically put this point here because now it will make much more sense and now it will be much easier for you to grasp what project management is. Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, methods, experience, tools and techniques on project activities to meet the project objectives. So you do know from the definition of project that it is a set of activities. So you are, as a project manager, applying knowledge, skills, methods, experience, tools and techniques to make sure that these activities meet the project objectives. And you already know how a project is going to be called successful. So you need to make sure that you apply all these good things to meet and to satisfy those conditions as well. And that is what project management is in a nutshell. Developing a new website or a software, of course, that is a project. Relief effort as a result of a natural disaster is also a project that you can manage. Construction of a building or a bridge are all examples of a project that requires project management. Now, business leaders understand that project management is a function within the organization. Nobody else is going to come in and manage your projects. So this is a function within the organization, and that is why business leaders hire individuals that are specifically trained in this discipline, and they are known as project managers to handle organizations' project management needs. So this is the reason why business leaders hire project managers, because they know that there are specialized people with specialized knowledge, right? These people are specifically trained in the application of knowledge, skills, methods, experience, tools, and techniques, and they are known as project managers. So they should be hired to do the project management job in an organization. Now, just above project is something known as program, and just above program is something known as portfolio. Let's talk about programs and portfolios. So programs are commonly defined as a group of related projects. This is important. Related projects that provide certain benefits when managed together. So in our 6 months construction project, let's say you are basically trying to construct 4 units together. So managing those 4 units as a program, managing those 4 projects as a program may be beneficial, because resources could actually be shared between those 4 projects, right? So that is a program. Managing the development of all e-commerce projects together can be a program. So let's say you were designing an e-commerce website, and your company designs many e-commerce websites. So developing all those e-commerce websites, managing that as a program, and having a program manager look over this program is going to be beneficial for sure. So here's an equation that is typically used, and you'll find in certain texts, where program is equals to subprograms plus projects and sub-projects. What is a portfolio? Now, portfolios are not just a group of programs, but can also include projects that do not align with any program. So this is important. Portfolios, of course, from common sense, you may make out that portfolio would be a group of programs. Of course, it is that, but it can also include projects as well that do not align with any program. They are so unique. There's no other project like that within your organization. So managing all types of website development related projects and programs can be a portfolio, while managing all mobile apps related projects and programs can be another portfolio. So this is an example of 2 different portfolios here. So here's the equation that you may find in certain texts. Portfolio is equals to sub-portfolios plus programs and sub-programs plus projects and sub-projects. So that is portfolio for you. So you have project, then you have programs, and then you have portfolios. So this slide is going to help you understand project, program, and portfolio diagrammatically as well. If you can see, this entire thing is one portfolio, and it has 2 programs, one, and this is the second program, right? Each program have certain projects which are similar in nature. This program has 3 projects which are similar in nature, and then you've got these 2 programs which are now a part of one portfolio. So this is one portfolio, and this is how you can understand projects, programs, and portfolios diagrammatically. You need to understand here one other point, that just like project management, we have a certification called PMP, Project Management Professional, from PMI. PMI offers 2 other certifications as well: PGMP, which is Program Management Professional, and PFMP, which is Portfolio Management Professional. So all these 3 certifications are provided by PMI. Just like you see project managers, you may see program managers and portfolio managers in certain organizations as well. Well, I hope you're enjoying the content so far. If yes, please consider hitting the like button. It helps us stay motivated and create more free content for you. All right, time for a quick agenda check. We are done with 6 items, 6 more to go. We are pretty much done with the basics. We are in the stage of taking a step ahead. And the next item that is on our agenda is project manager. Let's understand the project manager. From definition perspective, the project manager is the person assigned by the performing organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving the project objectives. So there is a performing organization which is basically delivering the project, and the project manager is going to lead a team, and that team is responsible for achieving the project objectives. So the project manager, he does project management, he or she does project management with the project team, not alone, right? He manages that team, he leads that team. But there are other managers as well, which you may find in your organization and many other organizations. Functional manager. So functional manager focuses on providing management oversight for a functional or business unit. Now, your project may require several teams from several different functions. Those teams or people from those teams may report to the functional manager, right? So you have a functional manager in the picture here. Then you have operations manager as well. Operations managers are responsible for ensuring that business operations are efficient. So these are three kind of managers you will typically find in every organization. You may require resources, human resources from functional areas as well as operational areas. And that is why you need to be good friends with the functional manager as well as operations manager. So there is a very famous talent triangle which is published by PMI. This is PMI stuff here. So what are the talents that a project manager should have? We already know who the project manager is. We already know that he may or may not need to deal with functional manager as well as operations manager. There's certain talents that the project manager should have. Number one is strategic and business management, which means business oriented skills, which applies to all certifications that PMI offers, right? So you've got benefits management and realization, business acumen, business models and structures, competitive analysis, customer relationship and satisfaction, industry knowledge, legal and regulatory compliance, market awareness, operational functions like finance and marketing, strategic planning, analysis, alignment. So these are some of the skills from strategic and business management domain that the project manager should have. Then domain expertise is something which is certification specific, which is specific to the certification offered by PMI here. But as a project manager, you should have technical knowledge as well, something like agile practices. So agile is now a part of PMP scope, PMP courseware itself. So agile practices is something you should know: data modeling and gathering, earned value management. This is something again part of project management professional courseware itself. Governance of all three: project, program, and portfolio. Life cycle management, performance management, requirements management and traceability, risk management, schedule management, scope management, time, budget, and cost estimation. Don't be scared if you're kind of worried with all these terminologies. We will discuss at least some of these terminologies later in this session when we dive deeper into the PMP courseware. And finally, in the PMI talent triangle, you have leadership skills. So competency in guiding and motivating. This also applies to all the certifications that PMI offer: brainstorming, coaching and mentoring, conflict management, emotional intelligence, influencing, interpersonal skills, listening, negotiation, problem solving, team building. Basically, strategic and business management, leadership, and technical are the kind of skills that you as a project manager should have. Our next topic is organizational structure, and we talked about how you need to deal with a functional manager, with an operations manager. So how often do you need to deal with them? How do you deal with them? All of that depends heavily on this topic, organizational structure. You see, the determination of the appropriate organizational structure type is a result of the study of trade-offs between two key variables. So within your organization, what is the organizational structure type that is being used? It depends heavily on these two key variables. Number one is the organizational structure types available for use. So there are different types of organizational structure that your organization can uh, select from, right? So we will take a look at all the different organizational structure types, and secondly, how do you optimize them for a given organization? So let's say there are five organizational structure types that you can select from, and you pick one of them. Now, how do you optimize that organizational structure for your situation, for your given organization, right? That is also dependent on the kind of organizational structure type that is being used within your organization. The one thing, the most important thing that you need to understand is that there is no one size fits all organization structure for any given organization. The final structure, it is going to be unique due to all the different variables that need to be considered. Now, there are many types of organization structure which we talked about, and each organization is going to have one. This is something that is actually the bottom line from this slide, that you won't find any organization that does not have an organizational structure, because each organization is going to have one. Now let's take a look at all the different types of organizational structures. The first one in the list is an organic organization. I'm sorry if this is a tongue twister for you, but this is where the organization might not even know the type of organization structure that they follow, because this is something that you are going to see in smaller companies. And this is also where project management is not even a full-time function. Now, when I say project management is not a full-time function, what I mean by that is that someone from the project team, let's say the engineering manager, the development manager, or even the quality manager, they are going to take up the additional responsibility of project management as well. And they are going to manage the project. Air quotes here. So they are going to manage the project. At least that's what they are going to think when they take up this additional responsibility. Now, some of the most important project management responsibilities, like let's say budget decisions, let's say coming up with the schedule for the project, these type of responsibilities might not even fall in the bucket of these folks who are acting as a project manager, because they are not really managing the project. They think that they are managing the project, but most of the decisions in smaller companies come from the top, the executive level itself. So in a way, the executives are seeing the project and taking the decisions that a project manager must be taking. Now, the second type of organization structure is known as a functional organization structure. What this means is the organization typically revolves around different functions. So there could be a quality function where you have quality team and a quality manager heading that quality team. You might have an engineering function where there's an engineering team or different engineering teams and respective engineering managers. So basically, all these teams work in separate silos, and each silo is going to report to its own functional manager. Like I said, the development silo or the development team is going to report to a development manager. The development manager is the functional manager here because the organization is revolving around different functions. So when you have such different teams and you have folks from these teams working on your project, what are you as a project manager supposed to do? You are not really supposed to do much because you do not have much authority or no authority in certain cases when it comes to functional organization, and you are only working as an expediter, which means there is a project schedule which is something that is given to you. You might have not even come up with the dates, come up with the milestones. This is something that the functional teams decided, the functional managers decided, and you were handed over the schedule for the project. Now you as a project manager or a project expediter, which is a correct word to define a project manager in such type of organizations. As a project expediter, your job is just to make sure that things are getting done on time. People or different teams, the project resources, the team resources, all of them are basically following the project schedule. That's all that you're supposed to do. You do not have authority over the project schedule. You do not have decision making authority over the schedule. You do not have decision making authority over resources. You do not have decision making authority over the budget or the cost of the project. All that you're doing is making sure that dates are met. If you are working in such a job, you are working in a functional organization. Most of the project manager's time in such organizations is spent in handling administrative tasks. This could mean compliance tasks. This could mean formalities, paperwork, stuff like that. So you as a project manager are more involved in such type of tasks rather than managing a project, right? So the functional manager is going to have total authority in this organization structure. All right, let's talk about multi-divisional organization structure. By the name itself, you can make out that different divisions are involved when we are talking about this org structure. So these divisions, these different divisions are part of the same organization itself. So what's happening here is that you as a project manager, your job is not much different from the job that you had when you were working in a functional organization, but there is a possibility of performing some amount of coordination work as well. Because this is a multi-divisional organization structure, which means different divisions may have different ways of managing project. So what happens is you as a project manager could be hosting meetings, writing minutes of the meetings. You could be communicating project status even to higher management as well, right? You are basically a project coordinator here because you are coordinating within different teams in a certain division of the organization. Now, bigger decisions, important key decisions like budget or resource allocation, they are still a function of the functional manager. So you don't have any say in the budgets or the resources, but you have certain amount of coordination work in multi-divisional organization structure. But how it gets interesting is the fact that different divisions within the organization can offer a different opportunity of managing projects. So a project manager in a certain division might have no say in the project schedule, but within the same organization, the project manager in a different division could be 100% responsible for coming up with the project schedule. So that's how multi-divisional organizations work. And each divisions are going to have their own governance framework, compliances, management roles, and stuff like that. So each division is basically working as a different company. It is as good as that. So in one division, you could be a project expediter, but In another division, the project manager could be a project coordinator. In some other division, the project manager's role could be drastically different. So that is a multi-divisional organization structure for you. Matrix organizations are quite popular because many organizations actually fall in the category of matrix organization structure. Now, this is where the functional manager as well as the project manager share authority, and how they are going to do it, how they are going to achieve this balance, we are going to take a look at it in the coming slides. So stick around. But for now, you need to know that there are three types of matrix organizations. You've got the weak matrix, balanced matrix, and then strong matrix. So let's look at each one of them. Number one is weak matrix organization. So what happens here is that the functional manager has higher authority as compared to the project manager. Remember, we said that the functional manager and the project manager are going to share authority, but we never said that they are going to share it equally. And this is where weak matrix comes into the picture, where functional manager has higher authority as compared to the project manager. Now, functional managers, they are responsible for resource related decisions, budget decisions. They are also going to approve all major project decisions. Now, you as a project manager, you will have some limited decision making, but you are still an expediter or a coordinator in the weak matrix organization setting. So you're still not there. You do have some say in the decision making of the project, but the upper hand is still with the functional manager. Okay, let's talk about the balanced matrix organization. And this is where the equal division of power and authority between the functional manager and the project manager takes place. So all the project team members are basically going to have two bosses, as if one wasn't bad enough. So now, how does this division of power is achieved between the project manager and the functional manager? This is done by making sure that whenever there is a people management related decision, it is approved by the functional manager. So if there is a people management related decision that the project manager needs to take, the functional manager should approve it. Only if the functional manager approves it, that decision can be implemented. Similarly, if there is any project related decision that needs to be taken, the functional manager needs to walk that decision through the project manager, and only once the project manager approves it, that is implemented. So that's the difference between the balanced matrix organization and other types of organizations. This is where both the project managers and the functional managers share equal authority and they work in tandem. Okay, next is the strong matrix organization structure. And as you might have guessed it by now, this is where the project manager has higher authority as compared to the functional manager. Now, the team members, the project team members, they are still reporting to two bosses. So the system that we established in the balanced matrix organization structure, it still holds in the strong matrix organization structure as well. But the key difference here is the fact that the delivery of the project is the most important thing in the strong matrix organization. And it makes sense, right? If the project is the most important thing, then obviously the project manager will have higher power and higher authority as compared to the functional manager. So for a project team member, the first priority is going to be the project and not their respective functional responsibilities. So one other thing to note here is the performance assessment, right? This could be your yearly appraisal, your annual appraisal. This is not just based on the functional expertise, but also how a team resource performed in the project as well. So project performance is also considered, not just functional expertise. And when the project performance is considered, obviously project manager has a say in such a scenario, in such an assessment. So the project manager has significant say in the annual appraisals of the team resources. Next is projectized organization structure, also known as project oriented organization structure. A key difference in such an organization structure is the fact that there are no functional teams. So if you need 4 developers, there is no development manager that you can go to and ask for 4 developers. What you need to do is either hire those 4 developers just for your project, or look into the pool of team resources available in your organization and look for 4 developers that you basically need for your project. So what it means is the teams are organized around projects, and we know that projects are temporary endeavors, which means the projects are going to complete one day, and once the project is over, the team resources will have no home, which means they might go back to the pool of developers or the pool of team resources that an organization maintains. If the organization does not maintain any such pool and hires for each project, then obviously they will not have a job once the project is over. And that's how projectized organization work. Now, this is obvious that the most power in this organization structure is with the project manager. The project manager is also responsible for key project decisions like the project's budget, the schedule, quality, resources, and other such areas. So, of all the organization structures that we have studied so far, project oriented organization structure provides the most authority and the most power to a project manager. All right, now let's talk about virtual organization structure. This is where the virtual teams come into play, and we have been observing how the virtual teams are on the rise. All credit for it goes to the ever improving communication technologies. It has never been easier for people that are from different geographies, different departments within the organization, even external consultants, all of them can come together and deliver a project. They need not be physically present in the same location to be able to deliver the project, right? That is the beauty of virtual teams. Someone in the US can work with someone in Europe as well as in India, and they can deliver a project together. This was never possible when we did not have communication technologies like we do today. Now, project managers in such organization are often going to facilitate team communications, because communications become very important here. So they are the one, the project managers are the one who are going to facilitate communications. They may even have authority for key project management functions like project budget, resource allocation, project schedule, and other such areas. So virtual organization, this is an organization structure that you are going to see around if you kind of observe. Hybrid organization structure, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It is a hybrid environment, and the aim of such an organization structure is basically twofold. Number one is you bring in the best practices from different organization structures into a single organization structure. So you like something about the strong matrix organization structure, you bring it in your organization structure. You like something about the virtual organization structure, you bring it in your organization structure. So you're bringing in best practices from different org structures into one. And the second aim is ensuring organizations can have adaptive life cycles as well as predictive life cycles. And if you're wondering what these life cycles are, stay tuned. We will cover life cycles in this training itself. For now, you need to understand the fact that your organization can bring in adaptive or predictive life cycle depending on the project requirement. So you're not stuck with just adaptive life cycle for delivering every single project of your organization. You can bring in predictive whenever you like, right? So this is how the hybrid organization structure basically provides advantages over other org structures. Now, while predictive lifecycle tends to rely more on management for a clear understanding of project scope in the initial phase of the project itself, adaptive lifecycle focuses on self-management within each team. Now, if you don't understand predictive lifecycle and adaptive lifecycle, you can park any questions that you have for now, because we are going to cover these topics in the later part of the video. But for now, you need to understand the fact that a predictive life cycle, it tends to rely more on management, while adaptive life cycle focuses on self management within each team. So that's a big difference between the two life cycles. Now, since different teams in a hybrid organization structure, since different teams use different combination of practices, the functioning of the project manager, this is also going to vary while dealing with different teams. So within one organization, you have different departments that are dealing with different projects, and in one department, your a project manager might have all the powers, all the authority, while in another department on another project, the project manager could just be an expediter. So that is possible in a hybrid organization structure. Now, before we deal with this topic, Project Management Office, PMO, let me ask you a question. We just talked about functional managers and how we have functional teams, developers that belong to the Java team report to a Java functional manager, right? So there's a team. Where do the team of project managers report to? The team of project managers might just report into this department, which is known as Project Management Office, PMO. Now, I say might because it is possible that project managers will have a separate team in certain organizations and they don't report to PMO. In certain organizations, they may, and that is why there are different types of PMOs, which we are going to look into now. First up, PMO is a group or department that defines and maintains standards for project management within the organization. So this is important. They define and they maintain as well the standards for project management. So who should be doing this? Who should be the members of the PMO to be able to do so? Of course, project managers, right? So that is why I say a team of project managers might make up the PMO. But in certain organization, there could be a different team, and the members of that team may not actively manage projects, but they would simply define and maintain the standards of project management within that organization. The PMO strives to standardize and introduce economies of repetition. Now, this is important. This point is important. Economies of repetition in the execution of projects. So let's take an example of call center setup project. Let's say you are an IT infrastructure project manager. You are going to deliver 200 seats for a call center setup. So what all infrastructure do you need? You need Wi-Fi, you need LAN connection, you need phones, whatever infrastructure that you need, right? Switches, wireless APs, everything. That is something that you are going to need and deliver as part of the project, right? The call center setup project. Now, let's say your next project is also a call center setup project. Now, can you take advantage of your previous project experience here? Of course you can. And that is where economies of repetition comes into the picture. If PMO takes certain documents from your previous project and keeps it in a central repository, so that every project manager who is going to deliver a call center project can look into those documents, can take reference from those documents and be able to deliver the project easily. That is what is known as economies of repetition, and that is something that PMO strives to achieve. So they want to standardize and introduce economies of repetition. They want to maintain such documents. They want to standardize the project management uh, discipline in an organization so that different project managers can make use of economies of repetition. Now, there are three different types of PMO actually. The first one is a supportive PMO. This type of PMO will basically provide templates. So, like I said in my previous slide in the call center project, right? In that example project, there you may have certain documents that you would have created which needs to be repeated for other call center projects. Those documents can be used as templates. They can be used as templates for future call center projects. So these templates are something that PMO will keep with them. PMO will uh, they are going to publish them in a central repository or store with themselves so that the PMs for similar call center project can use those templates, right, to manage their project and to carry out with their project management activities. The second kind of PMO is controlling PMO. So in addition to whatever the supportive PMOs do, controlling PMOs can audit a project to ensure the processes prescribed by them are being followed. So we just talked about how PMO describes the process, right? The standards for project management discipline in your organization. So members of the PMO can also come in and audit your project to make sure that you are following the standards that they have prescribed for your organization. And finally, you have directive PMOs, and these are the kind of PMOs that actually assigns project managers to projects, and PMs might be reporting directly to the PMO. So this is the kind of PMO which we initially talked about in the introduction uh, of this topic, where we said that PMO could actually be a team of project managers. A directive PMO is just that. It is a team of project managers, and project managers are assigned to projects through this directive PMO. Let's take a look into some practice questions here. PMO meets the project manager every once in a while to go over the project documents to ensure compliance. What kind of PMO is this? This is controlling PMO. PMO audits the project status at regular intervals to ensure reporting integrity. Again, this is controlling PMO. Project managers reaches Project manager reaches out to the PMO for a template of change log. So what kind of PMO is this? This is supportive PMO. This is providing templates. PMO shares the organization's knowledge base and lessons learned for the project manager to use. What kind of PMO is this? Again, this is supportive PMO. You are assigned a project to work on by the PMO. What kind of PMO is this? This is directive PMO. You report to this PMO. Before the project can move from design to coding, the PMO ensures that all the prescribed design processes were followed. So PMO here is ensuring that the prescribed processes by them, whether they were followed or not, this is a controlling PMO. All right, so we talked about stakeholders in one of the topics previously, where we talked about the factors that define the project success: cost, quality, schedule, stakeholder satisfaction, and alignment to business case. That is where I said that we will go over stakeholders as well. Although stakeholders itself is a pretty big area to cover, so we are only going to introduce it here because we talked about it in the factors that define project success. All right, so anyone who will be affected by the outcome of the project is a stakeholder. This is a very important definition, and this is going to kind of make sure that you don't fall into the confusion of who a stakeholder is. It basically says anyone who will be affected by the outcome of the project. So they are a stakeholder. Remember, we took an example of the Bangalore-Mangalore pipeline. They were affected by the outcome of the Bangalore Metro project, right? So they were a stakeholder, an important stakeholder. Project manager identifies all stakeholders and manages their expectations. Again, alignment to not just alignment, but stakeholder satisfaction, which was one of the important factors that determine project success. So you as a project manager, you need to identify all these stakeholders and you need to manage their expectations, something which was not done in that Bangalore Metro project we just talked about. Remember that there can be negative stakeholders. Now, this is where the problem comes in. There can be negative stakeholders. They are negatively impacted by the outcome of your project. Bangalore-Mangalore pipeline, that organization was negatively impacted by the Bangalore Metro project, right? So they were actually negative stakeholders, and it can be tricky. It can become tricky for a project manager to manage negative stakeholders. So three things that you need to remember about stakeholders, right? This can be a bit of an antithesis of what we just talked about in the previous slides about stakeholders satisfaction, but you need to understand that not all stakeholders have the same power or impact, right? They may not have the same power or the same impact on the outcome of your project. Not all stakeholders will always be satisfied. And this is important, right? We just talked about how stakeholder satisfaction is an important factor in determining whether your project was a success or not. But then not all stakeholders will always be satisfied. So this is something that you need to live with. This is something that you need to understand and accept as a project manager, that 100% of your stakeholders will not be satisfied with the way you deliver your project. Does that mean none of the project can ever be called a success? Of course not. People understand that there are negative stakeholders and they are negatively impacted by the outcome of your project. So they may not be satisfied always, and that is why they don't have to be. So not all stakeholders will always be satisfied, and they don't have to be. But you as a project manager, you need to do a lot of stuff to make sure that stakeholders are satisfied by and large, and you need to make sure that you identify all the stakeholders. Like I said, there's a large area to cover in the stakeholder management domain, and there's a separate knowledge area itself for stakeholder in your PMP courseware. But I just wanted to introduce this topic here because we talked about stakeholders in the previous slides. If you are looking to clear your PMP exam, you need to ensure that you have the right resources, the right books. And the books that we recommend for your PMP preparation are listed on this page, pmclounge.com/resources. We keep this page up to date at all times, so do check it out. All right, time for another agenda check. We are done with 10 items and we are down to the last two. We are also stepping into the academic side of project management right now. We are studying what you should be studying when you're starting to prepare for your PMP exam. So we'll take a look at the project management lifecycle and its types, and we'll also take a look at the project management domains. What are some of the tasks expected from a project manager? Let's move on. So let's talk about project management life cycle. Now, the project management life cycle, it basically comprises of the stages or phases that a project typically goes through. Remember, we mentioned phases in one of our previous slides where we were talking about checking quality timely. And that is where I said that you should check for quality at at the end of each phase as well, if possible. And so this is where the phases of the project comes through. So each project essentially has four phases. So you've got four phases for every project: initiation, planning, execution, and closure. So these are the four project phases that each project goes through. So you should ideally be checking for quality in all these four phases. Of course, quality is just an example that I'm taking because I talked about it in the previous slides. There are several different tasks that you as a project manager should be doing for each phase, and we will be going over it in the next slides. There is one more phase which is monitoring and controlling. This is one such activity which is common to all the phases. So you as a project manager are doing this activity, doing the monitoring and controlling while the project slides or goes through all these four phases. So this is how the cycle looks like. We just talked about how there are four phases: initiation, planning, execution, and closing. And then there is monitoring and controlling, which is common to all the four phases. So let's talk about the types of project management life cycle. There is a predictive life cycle, which you might be aware of as a waterfall life cycle or the waterfall model. That kind of life cycle, that kind of model is known as predictive life cycle. Then there is iterative and incremental life cycle, and you have adaptive life cycle, which is also popularly known as agile. So we will be looking into all these three types of project management life cycles. Let's get started. So the first one is predictive life cycle, which like I previously mentioned, is also known as waterfall model or a fully plan driven life cycle. Now, the project takes a phase by phase approach whereby the work on each phase is completed before moving on to the next phase. So we just talked about how there are different phases for each project, right? You've got initiation, you've got planning, you've got execution, and then you've got closure, right? Each phase, the work for each phase, each of these phases will be 100% complete. So if your project is in the initiation phase, the tasks involved in the initiation phase should be 100% complete before you can move your project to the planning phase, right? This is the main idea behind the waterfall model or the predictive life cycle. So all requirements must be signed off before development can begin. This is a classic example, right? You first gather requirements and then you start the development in a software project. So all the requirements must be gathered. Your requirements document must be signed off before you can start the development for those requirements. In the end, the outcome is the final product. So after you're through with the closing phase of the project, your outcome is basically the final product. Then you have iterative and incremental life cycle. So here the project team can start working on a single set of requirements once they are signed off instead of waiting for entire requirements to be freezed. So what we are doing here is we are not waiting for the 100% of requirements to be closed before beginning the development. If let's say a total of 20 requirements are expected in the project, 5 of them are complete and 5 of them are marked as complete as well as signed off by all the stakeholders, everyone involved. You can go ahead and begin the coding for those 5. You need not wait for the remaining 15 to be complete and signed off by everyone before you begin coding. So this is of course saving a lot of time here, right? The outcome is partial product that increments as we move further. So let's say you moved ahead and you started coding for those 5 requirements. You were done with the coding for those 5 requirements while the 15 requirements, the remaining 15 requirements were not yet signed off. Even the requirement number 6 was also not signed off. So what is the outcome here? The outcome is a partial product and it will have increments as we move further. Last one is adaptive life cycle or change driven life cycle, also known as agile. So just like the waterfall model, the project will take phase by phase approach, but multiple times. So the phase by phase approach is going to be followed, but it will be done multiple times. Each iteration will generate a deliverable or a set of deliverables, right? So at each iteration, since unlike the previous cycle that we talked about, iterative and incremental, here the requirements should be frozen, right? So not all requirements may be frozen, but at least for one iteration, the requirements should be frozen so that you have a shippable product at the end, right? So each iteration is going to generate a deliverable that can be shipped. And that is why this is different from the previous slide, because the previous slide didn't mention that you should have a deliverable, a shippable deliverable. It may be a partial increment itself, while here in Agile, you should have a shippable deliverable at the end of each iteration. Also, the outcome could be an instance of the end product. This is also important, right? It could be an instance of the end product, which can be improved in further iterations. So you may be delivering a beta of a software itself in the first iteration, and then second iteration will have the final product, the final outcome. All right, so we are down to the final topic of this training session, which is project management domains. Now, I must tell you, if you're preparing for your PMP exam, if you're looking to start your preparation, then this topic is going to be very important. And project management domains as a topic is introduced with the coming of PMBOK Guide Edition 7, because before PMBOK Guide Edition 7, we used to have knowledge areas, and knowledge areas, we had 5 knowledge areas, and they are now gone, and we now have 3 project management domains. So let's first understand what a domain really is. It is defined as the high level knowledge area. Remember, we are not using the word knowledge area anymore with the coming of PMBOK Guide Edition 7, but domain is also essentially a high level knowledge area that is essential to the practice of project management. The first domain that you need to study if you are preparing for your PMP exam is people domain, emphasizing the skills and activities associated with effectively leading a project team. So what are the skills? What are the activities that you should know of, that you need to perform as a project manager to effectively lead a project team? You will be learning all of that in the people domain. The next is process domain, and there are loads of project management processes that basically constitute the process domain, reinforcing the technical aspects of managing a project. So all the processes you're going to find in the process domain. And then you have business environment, highlighting the connection between projects and organization strategy. So your organization is delivering a project because it aligns to one of the strategies that your organization has. You as a project manager, you need to highlight that connection, you need to establish that connection, and perhaps you need to broadcast that connection to your project team so that everyone's aware of why they are delivering a project. And that is what you need to learn as part of the business environment domain. Now, strictly talking about the PMP exam, the number of questions that you're going to see in the exam, 42% of them are going to be part of the people domain. So they are from the people domain. 50% of the questions will come from the process domain, and then you have business environment. 8% of the total questions in the exam you can expect from the business environment domain. Now let's try and understand these domains a bit more in the coming slides. Now, whatever that you see on this slide and the coming slides are basically the tasks under each domain. So what are the tasks under people domain? And like I said, these tasks are basically the responsibility of a project manager. So under people domain, a project manager is expected to manage conflict. You need to understand what is the context of the conflict. You need to evaluate or recommend or reconcile your project team members and basically resolve conflicts, manage them. Lead a team. Can you set a clear vision and mission? Can you support diversity and inclusion, right? Can you inspire, motivate, and influence your team members? All that is part of leading a team. Support team performance. Again, can you appraise your team member performance against whatever the key performance indicators are. You need to determine an appropriate feedback approach, which could be different for each project team member. You need to verify what are the performance improvements, right? Empower team members and stakeholders. Can you organize around your team strengths? Can you support what is the task accountability of project team members? Right. So these are some of the ways you empower your team members and stakeholders. Ensure team members, stakeholders are adequately trained. So your team members or your stakeholders, are they trained enough? Do they know what they're working on? Can you allocate resources for training? Are you able to measure the training outcomes? Next is build a team. This is once again, you need to deduce project resource requirements. Can you maintain team and knowledge transfer? Right? All this is part of building a team. Address and remove impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team. Now, when you're working on a project, right, a project seldom goes on a straight path. You will always have issues. You will always have impediments. You will always have obstacles. You, as a project manager, need to take that responsibility to ensure that those impediments are removed, those obstacles are removed. You need to determine what these impediments and obstacles and blockers are. You need to prioritize them, and you need to basically use all tools that you own to ensure that the team can move ahead with the project. Negotiate project agreements. You need to analyze the bounds of the negotiations for agreement, right? There are several agreements that you need to work on when you're working on the project. You have to participate in agreement negotiations as well. You can come up with a negotiation strategy, and all that is again something that comes under people domain for a project manager. Collaborate with stakeholders. Pretty important. You have to work with stakeholders throughout the life of your project. So whatever are the agreement needs of the stakeholders, right, that's something you need to find out. You need to build trust. You need to influence the stakeholders, right? So whatever your project objectives are, they can be accomplished. Moving on, next is build shared understanding. Can you break down the situation to identify the root cause of a misunderstanding? Can you do that? That's how you build a shared understanding with different project team members, project stakeholders, right? You need to support the outcome of the agreements. You need to investigate what the potential misunderstandings are. So on and so forth. That's how you basically build a shared understanding. Engage and support virtual teams. Again, this the times that we are in, these are the times of virtual teams. You need to ensure that you are engaging and supporting whatever the needs are of the your virtual team members. It could be environment, it could be geography, it could be their time zone, it could be their culture, right? You need to also implement options for virtual team member engagement, right? What are the options that you have? And have to continually evaluate as well as to how effective a virtual team really is. Define ground rules, and when you define ground rules, you also are responsible for managing and rectifying any ground rule violation. So defining team ground rules with your project team is one thing, but you also have to manage any kind of violations. So that's something that you need to understand and keep in mind when we are talking about people domain. These are the tasks that you as a project manager are expected to perform, by the way, if you've forgotten, right? Mentor relevant stakeholders. Not all stakeholders will require mentoring, but for those who do, you need to allocate some time to kind of mentor them, and whatever mentoring opportunities that you have, you need to act on them. Promote team performance through the application of emotional intelligence. Can you bring emotional intelligence into the mix, right? Can you assess behavior through the use of personality indicators of your project team members, right? Can you analyze personality indicators and adjust to the emotional needs of your stakeholders? So emotional intelligence is something that has been brought into the mix here, and you have to promote your team performance by applying emotional intelligence. So those were the tasks for a project manager when it comes to people domain. So the next domain is process domain. And before we talk about all the tasks that are expected from the project manager as part of process domain, I'd like to let you know that everything that we are talking about, all these tasks, right? We have several videos on this channel that talk about these tasks and related concepts in detail, right? So subscribe to the channel, okay? Now, process domain has about 50% weightage. If you plan to take up your PMP exam, 50% of the question is going to be from this domain. So let's take a look at what are the tasks that you as a project manager are expected to perform as part of process domain. Execute the project with urgency required to deliver business value. Now, urgency not just for the sake of urgency, but urgency required to be able to deliver business value as part of this project. That is basically the whole idea behind this task, right? You need to assess what are the opportunities that you can deliver value, and then support the team to ensure that it is done. Next is manage communication. So you need to analyze what are the communication needs of all your stakeholders. You need to determine what would be the communication methods, how you are going to make those communications happen, what is going to be the frequency of the communication. You again have to communicate, of course. When we are talking about managing communications, you have to communicate, and you do that effectively, and you have to confirm that communication is actually taking place. So you need to ensure that the people you are communicating with actually understand what you are communicating, right? Actually understand the information, and you also need to ensure that a feedback is received. Assess and manage risks, more to do with risk management. You have to determine what your risk management options are. You need to assess and prioritize risks as well. You need to do that continuously. Engage stakeholders. Analyze your stakeholders with a power interest grid or some other tool, right? We have a video on power interest grid as well, and a lot of things that I'm talking about right now in this slide, we have videos on all of them. So categorize your stakeholders. You can engage with them with the category that you have created, right? So stuff like that. Plan and manage budget and resources. This has to do with your cost management, resources management, right? Both team resources as well as physical resources. You need to have a plan. You need to anticipate any future budget challenges, right? You need to plan and manage the resources as well, not just the budget, right? So that's one of the tasks. Next is plan and manage schedule. So this has to do with schedule management. You need to estimate the time required for all the project tasks, right? You need to ensure that you come up with a project schedule. A modification to the schedule is something that you need to ensure. You have to have a methodology that you are using for any kind of schedule modification as well. So all of that is part of plan and manage scope. Next is plan and manage quality of products or deliverables. So how do you determine the quality standard required for the project deliverables, right? So whatever the products or whatever the deliverables that your project is delivering, you have to have a quality standard which is accepted across the board. You can recommend options for improvement on that quality as well. You will obviously have to verify and survey the deliverables continuously throughout the life of your project. Plan and manage scope has to do with scope management, right? Can you determine and prioritize the requirements for the project, right? You cannot deliver the world, or you cannot deliver the sun in a project, right? So you need to determine, you need to prioritize the requirements. You may have to create a breakdown structure, like a work breakdown structure, WBS. You will of course have to monitor and validate the scope of the project. Integrate project planning activities, more to do with integration management. You may have to consolidate stuff. You may have to analyze whatever data that is being collected as part of all the different processes and tasks being performed throughout the project. And that's something which is related to integrate project planning activities. Next is manage project changes, which is of course has a lot to do with the change management part of project management. And you have to anticipate the need for change, right? You have to determine a strategy of how you're going to handle changes when they occur, because definitely changes is something that's a constant, right? So you can expect changes on your project. So you have to have a strategy on how you're going to handle changes when they come. So some more tasks under process domain. Next is plan and manage procurement. Related to procurement management, how are you going to manage your procurements? What's the plan? What is the requirements, right? How you're going to manage suppliers or contracts, right? So that's something you need to kind of come up with your entire procurement strategy, basically, which is part of plan and manage procurement. Manage project artifacts. There are a lot of artifacts when it comes to a project. You have to determine the requirements for managing the project artifacts. You will have to continually assess as well the effectiveness of the way you're managing your project artifacts, right? So very important. A lot of stakeholders are looking for some or the other artifact all the time. Next is determine appropriate project methodology or methods and practices that you are basically going to deploy as part of delivering this project, right? So are you going to follow the waterfall model? Are you going to follow the agile way of delivering a project, right? And how are you going to execute that project, right? So that's something that you as a project manager are kind of expected to definitely suggest and then follow along. Next is establish project governance structure. So, can you determine the appropriate governance for a project, right? Can you define what are the escalation paths and what is the threshold? When do you actually escalate? So that's all related to the project governance structure itself. Manage project issues. Recognize, when a risk becomes an issue. We talked about risk management in the previous slide. When the risk materializes, it becomes an issue. So that's something that you need to manage. It has become an issue now. Can you collaborate with the relevant stakeholders on the approach to how you are going to resolve all these issues, which is all part of managing your project issues. Ensure knowledge transfer for project continuity. Sometimes team members leave, sometimes team members move to other teams. So you need to ensure that there is a knowledge transfer. Sometimes you have a team of designers who are doing the design, and now the design is complete and the team needs to, your coding team, your engineering team needs to start coding. So you need to ensure that there is a knowledge transfer done between the set of designers and the set of coders, so that important information is passed along. So that is what we mean by ensuring knowledge transfer, to ensure the project continuity is maintained. And finally, plan and manage project or phase closure for or transitions. So this again has to do with what is the success criteria for closing a project or closing a phase, right? You have to determine it. You have to ensure that everyone agrees to it, right? You don't have to be, you don't, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you yourself think a project is complete, but there are different stakeholders on your project who did not know that this is the success criteria of the project, and this is when we call it done, right? So that's something you need to kind of plan in advance, and you need to ensure it is managed properly. This is not just applicable for the project, but the different phases of the project as well, right? You need to have a quality criteria of when we say our design is done, when we say our coding is done, when we say our certain type of testing is done, right? What is the success criteria? What is the quality criteria for that? So that's something that you need to plan and manage accordingly. Finally, the last domain is business environment domain. And this is very, very important because projects are not delivered in seclusion. Projects are ultimately delivered in business environment. So you as a project manager need to understand the external business environment as well. And you are responsible to ensure that your project is doing absolutely fine in this business environment. So there are tasks like project compliances, right? What are the compliance requirements of your project? They could be, security compliances, health and safety compliances, regulatory compliances. So you need to find out what all compliances are applicable to your project and how you are going to comply with those compliances, right? How you're going to manage those compliance requirements. And what if you are not able to do so? What is the cost of non-compliance, right? What are the consequences of non-compliance? So that's something that you as a project manager need to determine and understand, plan and manage accordingly. Evaluate and deliver project benefits and value. Gone are the days when you delivered a project in time and you're done with it. You have to ensure that the benefits and value is being recognized as part of this project, right? So you have to investigate what are the benefits that are identified as part of delivering this project. Can you verify the measurement system of tracking all these benefits? Can you appraise stakeholders of the value gain as your project progresses, right? So all this is something that you as a project manager need to ensure. In addition to your scope, schedule, cost, and all that, that's all fine. But end of the day, organizations deliver projects to realize some benefits, to realize some value, right? Evaluate and address external business environment changes for impact on your own project scope. And this is very, very important. So can you survey what are the changes to the external business environment? Like, are there new regulations that you need to follow? Is there a technology change? Are there any geopolitical change? Are there any changes in the market? Let's say your project is basically delivering a software that a customer can purchase by doing a one-time transaction. But when you survey the market, you realize that all these other software companies, all your competitors are actually offering a subscription model. So that means the product of your project, which is a software, it should also be following a subscription model, because that's what the market demands. That's what the business environment is outside, right? So things like this is also something that you as a project manager need to take care of. And finally, if there are any organizational changes, you need to support that. You need to assess what the culture of your organization is. You need to evaluate the impact of any kind of organizational change to your project, and if there are any actions that you should be taking, right? So all this is basically telling you that as a project manager, you are not delivering your project in seclusion. You are delivering your project in business environment, and you need to be aware of business environment, and you need to act accordingly. And with that, we come to an end of this session. I hope you got value out of it. I hope you enjoyed and understood the basics of project management. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Smash that like button. We really, really appreciate it. And don't forget to check out the website pmclounge.com. If you like our work, consider contributing at pmclounge.com/contribute. Thank you.